Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our Tropical Weather Outlook video for today, Monday, June 30th, 2025. Let's start off with the National Hurricane Center homepage to show you what is going on in the tropics right now. In the Atlantic, we have the remnants of Barry, which moved inland as a tropical depression last night after becoming a tropical storm throughout the day yesterday. And this is the last advisory on Barry. It was issued at 5 a.m. Eastern Time and 4 a.m. Central Time. And now Barry is raining itself out over northeastern Mexico, bringing a lot of heavy rain and flash flooding, but nothing more than that, obviously, because it is no longer a tropical system. But obviously, the last National Hurricane Center advisory issued, Barry was 30 miles per hour with a minimum central pressure of 1,008 millibars. But beyond Barry, we now have to watch off the southeast coast and maybe even the northern Gulf Coast, because it looks like in general across the southeast we're going to have a frontal system that will drape across, and there will be a low pressure that tries to break off, and potentially, if it is able to remain over water long enough, try to develop and become a tropical system. Typical early season sort of setup that we have with these frontal systems that end up moving across the southeast and then break off, and we end up getting a low pressure form from it, and that ends up developing and becoming a tropical system. And it looks like that setup might be what's coming up here within the next week, especially as we head towards the end of this week into the weekend, and maybe into early next week. And I'll show you what the models show with that, from the GFS to the European ensembles, a little bit later on, so stay tuned for that. In the Eastern Pacific, however, we have Tropical Storm Flossie, which is on the verge of becoming a hurricane over the next several hours as it moves west-northwestward, parallel to the Mexican coast. And the good news is that this will stay off the coast of Mexico, but there are tropical storm watches and warnings in effect for portions of the central southern Mexican coastline because of outer rain band effects that Flossie is bringing to the coast, and I'll go over those in a bit. But currently, Flossie is 60 miles per hour, the latest advisory as of 9 a.m. Central Time in Mexico. 60 miles per hour, minimum central pressure of 998 millibars, and it is located at 15.6 north and 102.6 west, and it is moving northwest at 10 miles per hour. And then after that, the activity in the Pacific will not be done. The Pacific is just going to continue chugging out. And yes, by the way, Flossie is the earliest six-name storm on record in the Pacific. Maybe we're going to go soon for the earliest seventh name storm on record, because we have another area of interest here in the Pacific. Low chance of development within the next 7 days at 30% for now, but the models are showing that something else might have tried to develop in the Pacific once Flossie gets on out of here. So let's really quickly take a satellite image view of Flossie right now. Definitely looks like a strengthening system, has that nice shrimp look to it with a curved band here that kind of comes in like this and then tucks into the center, which is somewhere right in here. We also have constant convective bursts here trying to develop a nice CDO, and there's even a few curling convective bursts that you can see that are trying to develop within this system. So this is definitely intensifying. And you could also see here along the Mexican coastline, there are a few showers and thunderstorms making it to the coast. Some of these do have tropical storm force winds, and obviously there is the threat of heavy rainfall too along the coastline, and also some high surf that we need to be worried about. So definitely keep in mind with that. There are tropical storm warnings in effect, and also some tropical storm watches in effect too. Looks like the wind field has not actually reached the coast yet, but this probably will get close enough, at least with the track. Maybe this will get close enough that the wind field will maybe expand and, I guess, bring tropical storm conditions to the coast. But Flossie, at least in terms of its actual track, will remain offshore. It's going to become a hurricane probably by later this evening into tonight and then into tomorrow. And let's actually see really quickly how strong Flossie is going to get. National Hurricane Center actually expects it to get to 100 miles per hour, so They forecast a Category 2 peak with Hurricane Flossie before it starts weakening probably by late Wednesday into Thursday, and then eventually moves west-northwest and then dies off near the Baja Peninsula as we head into the end of the week. But in terms of impacts, though, obviously there are tropical storm warnings in effect for the Mexican coastline because there will be tropical storm conditions. Even though this storm will stay offshore, will bring lots of heavy rainfall too, and I always stress about how much of a big impact the rainfall is. In fact, some portions of the Mexican coastline could see as much as 6 to 8 inches of rain, 150 to 200 millimeters of rain for, using the metric system. And then even wider portions form along the coastline, including pretty much most of the coastline of the state of Jalisco, all the way down to Guerrero, and even extending further beyond that, 4 to 6 inches of rain. So up to half a foot of rain for a large stretch of the central to central southern Mexican coastline. And we always know, I always stress that rainfall is the biggest impact when it comes to a tropical cyclone, not the winds. And you must also remember that a tropical cyclone is not one point on the map. Even though Flossie is going to remain offshore, the center will remain offshore. The center is just going to move on here to the northwest, paralleling the Mexican coastline. The wind field and the rainfall aspects of the storm are stretched well beyond the center, and that's pretty much what's going to be the case here along the Mexican coastline. So if you are here, please keep in mind of the treacherous conditions that will be in effect for the next few days. Obviously, don't go outside and stay indoors. Won't be anything too major. Obviously, this will stay offshore, but do keep in mind of the impacts that Flossie will bring to the Mexican coastline, because it will be a nuisance and a ruiner of plans for sure, even though Flossie is not going to make a direct landfall on the Mexican coastline. Here's a look at sea surface temperature anomalies of the Atlantic and the Pacific, because I just want to show you how things look sea surface temperature wise in Flossie's path. And they are pretty warm, especially right near the Mexican coastline, stretching all the way up to the Baja Peninsula, and then they start cooling off dramatically right after that. But right near the Mexican coastline for the next few days, Flossie should be, especially right through here, Flossie should be in decently above normal sea surface temperature anomalies in the Pacific, so that definitely helps it in strengthening into a hurricane. And then that drops off quite a bit, especially once you get around the Baja Peninsula, and then north of that, all much below normal sea surface temperature anomalies, stable air mass, and once it moves into this region, Flossie is then gonna pretty quickly weaken and dissipate, and probably be out of our hair within the next few days, especially by the end of the week. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic, once again, sea surface temperature anomalies remain very warm, especially through the MDR, and especially here in the northern Gulf and off the southeast, and boy, especially between the southeast and Bermuda, much above normal sea surface temperature anomalies here. This is going to be awfully interesting to see, especially once we get towards the peak of the hurricane season. And typically we have a lot of storms that may be, especially these longer track storms in recent years, that form in the MDR and then tend to curve north of the islands and then end up near Bermuda or between Bermuda and the southeast coast. And that area is very warm, so we'll have to see how that plays out for the peak. That'll be awfully interesting. But at least in terms of development over the next week or so, where we are watching near Florida, either off the southeast or the northern Gulf, sea surface temperature anomalies, and both sides are very, very warm and much above normal. So that'll definitely help with whatever development prospects we get there. And really quickly, looking at the velocity potential, and this is mainly to talk about the Pacific. We do have a convectively coupled Kelvin wave, which is moving through right now, which you can see right through here. And it is going to move through the Pacific as we head into the month of July. and that'll probably help, not only in obviously not just helping Flossie's development, that'll also probably help in terms of keeping the atmosphere favorable in the Pacific for at least one or two developments in the near future in the Pacific before maybe things will start to quiet down there a little bit. And then maybe we'll see if this Kelvin wave is able to make it into the Atlantic and tries to spin something else. Besides the thing that we have off the southeast coast, that's actually not really tropical related in terms of convectively coupled Kelvin waves, but probably not. And then after that, especially as we head into the month of July, look here in the Atlantic, we have a lot of these oranges and browns and yellows here in the velocity potential that represents sinking air in the Atlantic. So probably looking at a not very active July in the Atlantic. And then meanwhile, here in the Pacific, especially the Western Pacific, a lot of these rising motion shadings remain. And the Western Pacific is definitely going to stay active if it's able to produce something, because for some reason it always seems like something is trying to develop. The models hint at something in the Western Pacific, but for some reason it just doesn't materialize. But they're probably going to get a pretty major storm here in the next week or so, and that window will remain throughout a decent bit of July, and maybe we might even still get some more development in the Eastern Pacific. So for the meanwhile, the Atlantic will remain quiet, and then we'll have to watch throughout the month of July, especially as we get towards the end of the month and we start getting towards August, when we typically see the Atlantic ramp up. Does the pattern change and favor more development in the Atlantic and less in the Pacific? We'll have to see. But right now, for now, let's take a look at the GFS and the models for the next 7 days. Just taking a look at the Pacific first. And you can see here within the next few days, we have Flossie continues to move on off to the northwest, parallels the Mexican coastline, and then once again, as we get towards Friday and Saturday, eventually dissipates and gets out of our hair. And then, as you can see, towards the end of the week, into the 5 to 7 day time frame here in the Pacific, once again, yet another storm develops and continues the train of activity that we've been having over the last several weeks here in the Pacific. And then let's really quickly flip this to the Atlantic, and you can see the setup that develops here. We have a front that comes off the southeast, and then eventually, as it gets off the southeast coast, we have a piece of energy on the southernmost end of that front that breaks off. And the GFS is not as enthusiastic, believe it or not, as the Euro in terms of developing this, because as you can see, some energy does break off, but it remains in general around Florida and off the southeast. It's not able to consolidate off the coast in either the southeast off Florida or in the northern Gulf. So we kind of just have a bunch of energy that meanders around, and then as we get towards the 7 day time frame, nothing is able to consolidate at all on the GFS. The Euro, on the other hand, is much more enthusiastic, especially when you look at the ensembles, and you can see they do quite a bit of things here. In fact, we even have one that creates a hurricane here in the northern Gulf, so that's very interesting. And I will say, and a lot of people have been pointing this out on Twitter as well, that the Euro ensembles have actually been very good, especially with sniffing out the development when it came to Barry compared to the GFS, which showed pretty much nothing. So if you want to take that to, the past determines the future, maybe you could say that the Euro is onto something here, and maybe the GFS is slacking behind, but we'll catch up in a few days to the Euro, and maybe we are indeed looking at potentially at a development off the southeast coast. Well, the National Hurricane Center has it highlighted anyways, so we'll just have to see what happens in regards to that. With that being said, though, not much else to talk about related to the tropics for the rest of today, so I'm going to end it off here. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. And as always, I'll be back with more tomorrow.